According to Greek legend, Sparta began with violence and conquest, when in 1150 BC, invaders from the north, who believed themselves to be descendants of Hercules, moved south to reclaim what they believed to be their ancestral land. When King Lacedaemon took over the central peninsula, he named it Laconia after himself. He named the central capital Sparta after his queen. For nearly 400 years, until roughly 750 BC, Sparta was Laconia's religious, cultural, and governmental center. The land they chose to take over was Messenia, a separate Dorian community directly to the west. Messenia had rich farmland and a thriving agricultural economy. Messenia was also surrounded by rich stores of iron, Greece's most precious commodity for military equipment. Sparta needed Messenia, but the Messenians did not go quietly.
People of Messenia were on their way to creating their own city-state culture. They resisted, they tried to remain independent, but the Spartans defeated them.
It would take nearly 100 years for Sparta to fully overtake the Messenians. But by the 7th century BC, Sparta ultimately controlled 8,000 square kilometers and became the largest city-state in the Greek Empire. The Messenians were forced to work the land as agricultural serfs called helots.
The city-state tried to enslave an entire Greek people. There's probably 250,000 residents of Messenia, and Spartan society is coalesced around 10,000 Spartiate warriors. So they're vastly outnumbered.
We ought to think of Sparta as a state under siege, luxury of giving up their security needs.
The situation called for the Spartans to remake their society from top to bottom. They developed new rules that would control every aspect of its citizens' lives.
They are the only Greek population that devotes itself entirely to the arts of war.
According to the Greek historian Plutarch, the architect of this new warrior city-state was a Spartan lawmaker named Lycurgus. Lycurgus reportedly traveled throughout the Mediterranean, gathering the best of military statecraft from Crete, from Ionia, and from Egypt. Their society was based on a pyramid of power. At the top were the roughly 10,000 men of the Spartan elite. They were called in Greek the homoioi, meaning the equals. In theory, each would have the same wealth and the same say in the government.
The goal was to make a society of equals, an army that could fight and where there would be no dissension, a polity that had unity.
Everything aims at homogeneity, similarity, if you will, and that is one of the keys to the Spartan system. We're going to have stability, we're going to have order, we're going to have obedience.
Below the homoioi were the roughly 50 to 60,000 free people who lived throughout Laconia, mostly on the outskirts of the capital city of Sparta. They were called the Perioikoi, the dwellers around.
They allowed them to be independent, except that they couldn't make any political decisions. And they also compelled them to follow the Spartans whithersoever they may lead.
The Perioikoi were essentially a non-voting middle class that kept the homoioi prepared for war.
The great bulk of the trade and the manufacturing, the craftsmanship that was necessary to maintain Spartan society, somebody had to make them weapons after all, was done by these Perioikoi.
They were the engine that made it all work because they freed the Spartan peers so that they had full leisure time to train athletically and every other way for war.
All pursuits not essential to the new Spartan machine were abandoned. At the bottom, and outnumbering everyone else, were the helots. In the decades to come, Sparta would devise a new system of government that would control every citizen, from cradle to grave. The means of indoctrinating Spartans into this new society would be an educational system that prepared 7-year-olds to become killing machines. Control by the state began at birth. Inferior children were killed. Superior children were indoctrinated, trained, and molded into the kind of fighting force that could control the helots, the enslaved people of Messenia.
Once you have a small population that must enslave a large population, then each Spartan, in the Spartan view, must be qualitatively superior to every 10 or 12 Messenians. The only way they felt they could achieve that level of military excellence was to bring all of the youths in a group, give them standardized training, and do it from a very early age.
When they were 7 years old, Spartan boys were taken away from home to be cared for and trained by the state. They lived in a kind of military academy called the Agωγη.
At age 7, the young Spartan boy enters the world of males that really will be his life for the rest of his time, for as long as he survives. Initially, he is brought into what I have sometimes called the Cub Scout troop from hell.
The Agωγη is 15 years long pep rally. The Spartans are being prepared to go into battle. And here an alleged saying of Patton comes to mind. Patton is supposed to have said to his men, "I don't want you to kill for me, I want you to die for me." And that's the thing about the Spartans. They are ready to die.
For a Spartan boy's first 5 years in the Agωγη, from age 7 to age 12, a government trainer-in-chief called a paidonomos instructed him in basic literacy and physical education. The main lesson in the Agωγη from day one was to toughen the boys for the hard life that lay ahead of them.
The Spartan training system was clearly meant to test for weakness and to cull out weakness. And throughout his life, a Spartan warrior had to worry about being watched by his fellow Spartans. They were constantly watching him for weakness, watching to see if he is really up to speed.
Again and again, the rule in the Agωγη is, can you take it? How tough are you? Are you tough enough to be a Spartan male? This is a tough love system, and it's more tough than love.
Spartan girls also received training, but at home.
She was trained from childhood to be tough, to be physically fit at any rate, to be presumably to some extent self-reliant.
Because their raison d'etre was to produce strong sons to defend the community, they ate well, they participated in athletics, so they were, in a way, prime breeding specimens.
At age 12, Spartan boys entered the second level of Agωγη training, and conditions got much worse. Each boy was issued a single cloth cloak. This was the only garment they were allowed to wear year-round. They were also required to go barefoot, all in the name of toughening them physically and mentally.
Anybody who's been to Laconia in the winter, you can see that the very idea that you would go barefooted or you'd have a single cloak would kill a modern American within minutes.
Tired and cold, the boys were also hungry.
The evening meals were cooked, if that's the right word, by the helot attendants. And they cooked absolutely horrendous food, apparently. And the most famous meal of the Spartans is what's called the blood soup. It's basically pork with a lot of blood floating around.
Get enough food to survive, but you don't get enough food to be happy. And so you're taught right away that if you want to get enough food to be happy, to feel full, you're going to have to steal it.
That was done in part to keep them sharp, but also in part to teach them survival skills, because it was all part of the business of making a Spartan, who would be the kind of guy who could manage to forage around the country and keep himself alive if he had to.
A Spartan child who is caught stealing will be punished, and yet a Spartan child who does not steal will be regarded as a complete wimp. If you are very good at cheating and you don't get caught, then you in fact will flourish.
Toughening and strengthening Spartan adolescents was deemed necessary because of the kinds of battles they would one day fight. Life in the Agωγη was a weeding out process. Boys were continually required to pass tests of strength, flexibility, endurance, and cunning. Failure was severely punished. Sparta's legacy is that they not only created the idea of military discipline, but that they also perfected it through a social structure and a training program that began at age 7. By 20, most Spartan males graduated from the one system and entered another, one that would remain part of their lives until death.